Everyone says you need cash flow to get rich in real estate, but what if I was to tell you that most investors, especially new investors, are calculating their cash flow all wrong, and it's costing them thousands and thousands of dollars each year? So be sure to stick around for this video because we're going to dive into it today. Hey everybody, it's Randy Wolfe. Thank you for tuning in today, and I'm excited about this video because we're going to dive into cash flow and a bunch of the misconceptions around cash flow. Before we do, if you have not already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. I'm putting out content every single week, so let's dive in. So the first thing is, most people that are especially just getting started with investing in real estate and rental properties, they do the following. They say, okay, here's my mortgage amount. My mortgage is, let's just say $1,000 a month. Here is my rent amount. It's $1,400 a month for the rent. $1,400 minus my mortgage of $1,000 is $400. So I am cash flowing $400. Well, not exactly. So let's talk about some of the things that you need to factor in and you might not be doing so. And again, don't feel bad because many people overlook a lot of these things. So I talk about in some of my other videos, number one is vacancy. So vacancy, when your property is not rented, that is vacancy. And as you can imagine, if your property is vacant a month, 2 months, 3 months, like your cash flow is getting absolutely killed from that. Like 3 months of vacancy, is brutal. In that situation, if it's $1,400 a month, I mean, that over the period of time, that is adding up while you're paying that mortgage. In the example previously of $1,000, you're paying $3,000 of mortgage payments, but you're losing the $1,400. And I can go ahead and I'll spoiler alert tell you, if you're making $1,400 in rent and your mortgage payment is $3,000 or $1,000, you are probably not cash flowing. So not only are you not cash flowing, but you're also just that loss of rental income is really hitting you hard in the pocket. So vacancy is important and you need to factor that in. All right. I would definitely look at in your market, depending on how hot or cold your market is, at least factoring in a percentage of the rent. Oftentimes you could take 1 month's rent and use that as a benchmark, and then once you get more and more advanced, you can start to figure out and identify a typical vacancy. But utilizing, say, 1 month rent is a good target to basically kind of like set aside, thinking about the fact that you're going to have that vacancy. And I'll talk about how you sort of set this aside in a minute. The next thing is repairs. Wow, y'all, repairs. As you grow your rental portfolio, you are going to have repairs, and the more rental properties you get, the more it starts to feel like every single doggone week you got something that needs to be repaired. I'm in a phase right now where I have a lot of properties, and unfortunately, and it's not preferred, and I don't advise this, but there are a good bit of my properties that I had existing tenants, and they could not afford getting a big rent increase. And so I made the decision to allow them to stay at their current rental rates and only very minor rent increase over the last couple of years. But the properties had a lot of deferred maintenance. And so instead of being able to go in, renovate those properties, and now lease them for really good rental amounts, I just decided to just sort of over time keep the people in there and just sort of make the repairs. And now it seems like every week I turn around, something is going on. A unit goes out, there's a roof leak, there's a plumbing issue. And so again, I made that decision. Probably from a business standpoint, not the best decision, but like I just feel bad at kicking people out. And so that's the decision that I've made. But there's repairs, there's CapEx. So CapEx is different from repairs. So CapEx, so think about the easiest way to explain CapEx is like your big items. These are things like your roof, your electrical system, your plumbing, replacing all the plumbing. Like these are like the big ticket items. Going in and, for example, having to put in a new driveway or something like that. Those are the CapEx items. And so you have to figure out, calculate up what those items are. And then the way that you do this is you typically just divide that over 12 and you take out a portion of your rent. So whatever the rent is, let's say for you look at your vacancy, whatever that 1 month's rent is, divide that by 12, and that's what you set aside in a reserve account for your vacancy. Then you can look at CapEx, repairs. You can use a variety of percentages for that. You can use anywhere, like for repairs, if you have already went in and renovated the property and everything's good to go, and CapEx, you've already replaced the roof, done the big items, you can typically do about 3 to 5%. If you have not done those things, you're going to have more repair frequency, more CapEx frequency. And so you've got to go in there and you need to put a higher amount. I'm not going to tell you what amount. Really, I would say that's something that you need to kind of think about, but certainly I would err on the side of like 6% of those things for CapEx, maybe 6% for repairs, and having the 1 month rent divided by 12 for vacancy. But again, that's something it's hard to tell you that, because depending on the shape of the property, the condition, how much repairs it's needing already, CapEx, it's kind of hard to tell you that. So that's something you really need to kind of factor in and put some thought into on a case-by-case basis per property. But you definitely need to be considering that. Number 2, cash flow is really just a monthly snapshot. And what I mean by that is when you're thinking about true wealth, that's going to come from long-term equity and long-term appreciation of these properties. So, cash flow really is important. And I think particularly as an investor, when you're getting started out, different economic environments can dictate how much cash flow you try to shoot for. But at the end of the day, I think you should try to have enough cash flow to at least service the debt. Be able to service your debt, cover vacancy, CapEx, repairs, all those things, and hopefully you've got a little bit left over. Where you can get in a lot of trouble is if you are buying deals where you do not have cash flow. And you could say, well, I'm only losing $200 a month. It's not that big of a deal. I'm banking on appreciation. Well, if you do enough of those deals like that, $200 a month becomes $2,000 a month or $20,000 a month. That's when you get in big trouble. So I would definitely shoot for cash flow, but keep in mind that cash flow is just a snapshot. Really where the big wealth comes in is from the appreciation of the properties over the years and that equity that you're building in the property. And you're building equity in the property in a variety of ways, and some of which I'll talk about in a few of these others, but namely appreciation and debt pay down. Number 3 is high cash flow, oftentimes, not always, can mean higher risk. So what do I mean by that? Well, generally speaking, the nicer the area and the nicer the properties, the more condensed your cash flow is going to be. But if you're looking at an area that is, let's say on the other side of that, it's an absolute war zone and it's like a D-class kind of area, typically you can get higher cash flow. And why is that? That almost doesn't seem to make sense, right? But the reason is because those properties are a lot cheaper to buy. So you can buy a property for, let's say, 50 grand and rent that property out for maybe $1,000 a month, and your debt service on 50 grand is pretty low, and if you have debt on it, and so your cash flow is going to be a lot higher than, let's say, if you go and you buy a $250,000 or $350,000 property. Maybe on that property you get $2,000 a month, but that $2,000 a month you're having a substantially higher amount of property taxes and insurance and things of that nature. And again, if you look at the math on that, a $50,000 property that gets $1,000 a month, if you double that, then a $100,000 property should theoretically get $2,000 a month, but that's not the case. The higher the property, typically, amount of rent that you're going to get in a percentage format starts to dwindle and go down further and further. You hear sometimes us talk about the different rules, rule of thumb, like 2% rule, 1% rule, that sort of thing. Well, almost always when you get into nicer properties, that gets condensed down more than if you're in a property in a not so nice area. Number 4, cash flow can really be a lie if you're self-managing your property and not factoring that in. So I'm a big proponent of, I think personally, it's a good idea in the beginning to self-manage your properties. I think it's important because I think you kind of need to know and understand the fundamentals of property management. I think you should probably not do that and be an idiot like I was and do it for so long and still, my management is in-house, but for the longest time I self-managed my properties. So maybe not doing as long as I did, but being able to self-manage your property in the beginning so that you understand kind of the ins and outs of property management. You learn it, you get proficient with it, enough information where you can be somewhat dangerous with it, and then hand that off, okay? But while you're managing your own properties, you should absolutely account for the property management fee, which is normally, not always, but about 8 to 10% is what you're going to see when you're first getting started out. You're probably going to pay 10% for property management. That's just the way it is. Maybe you can find someone that'll do it for less, but typically about 10%. So it's important that you factor that in, because if you're self-managing your properties, unless you want to manage them forever, which trust me, you don't, then you want to be able to factor that cost in. So when you're underwriting a deal, this is where this really comes in. It's critical. You need to factor in the things I've mentioned before: vacancy, CapEx, repairs, and you also need to factor in property management. That's important to do that. So again, I said before, I didn't really want to give you exact numbers. A lot of times I like to look at about 20% of the rent as something to set aside that covers property management, CapEx, repairs, vacancy, that sort of thing. That's just kind of my thing because I have enough money to I can cover vacancy and not be strapped. So if I have multiple properties go vacant, I'm in a position where I can cover that rent. So I do 20% typically, but it might be a situation depending on the property. You may want to do higher. So then that 20% is again the amount of rent. You take the rent, and again, simple math, because I'm a simple math guy. If it's $1,000, 20% of $1,000 is $200. That's $200 from the cash flow that you set aside to cover those things. Well, Randy, what if it's $1,000 a month, and what if my mortgage and taxes and insurance on my mortgage, what if it's $800? Well, then you don't have any cash flow, because that $200 needs to be set aside. Don't go living off of that. You need to set that aside because you're going to get hurt if you have a big expense in a repair, vacancy, that sort of thing. So number 5 is tax benefits boost real estate cash flow. So when you're looking at this, you have to look at things in multiple ways. So it's not necessarily one size fits all. Sometimes you're looking for like, okay, how much pure cash flow am I receiving that I can use to pay the bill? Okay, but oftentimes though, there are certain things where you might not necessarily factor in and look at it from a standpoint of your actual return. And that's where the tax benefits come in that really boost your cash flow. So at the end of the year, you are able to depreciate your rental properties. Now you can do this in a variety of ways. I'm not a CPA, as I always say, and don't play one on YouTube, but you can actually depreciate properties over an extended period of time. You have the ability to depreciate properties up front. We've got currently going on some legislation that could allow 100% bonus depreciation. Again, hope it works out. That would be awesome. But there are significant tax benefits where you're able to get by depreciation. You also are able to write off these expenses that you're running into. So when you are putting in repairs, when you're any type of, when you have to buy something for the property, just general repairs in your LLC or your entity, like you get to write that stuff off. So if you look at cash flow, typically speaking, there are sort of these phantom things that are going on behind the scenes that either can help your cash flow or lower your cash flow. And taxes are something that are a big boost in your cash flow. So even though necessarily each month you're not necessarily looking at that, at the end of the year, it's always a good idea. Once you get your taxes filed and your bookkeeping and all that stuff, any loose ends tied up, be sure to go back and look, and you'll see that those tax benefits helped you theoretically actually boost your cash flow. You just might not have necessarily known it the month of. The number 6 thing that most people get wrong when it comes to cash flow is the fact that cash without reserves is a trap. I've talked about this already in some of the previous little numbers that we've covered here, but if you don't have reserves, you are setting yourself up for major problems, because there are things that just have to be replaced over a period of time. If you have a hot water heater, that hot water heater is going to need to be replaced 7 to 15 years later. If you have a roof, you're typically going to have to replace that roof every 30 years or so. If you have carpet, paint, obviously you're going to have paint, but like those things, when people move out, you're typically a lot of times going to have to replace that ever so often. Then you just have the random stuff that pops up. The dishwasher broke, it doesn't work, you got to buy a new one. The refrigerator went out, you got to get a new refrigerator. If you don't have reserves, that's when you find yourself in trouble, or you've got all this cash flow that was coming in, you feel great, and then now all of a sudden you got to write a check for these things, and you're like, wait a minute, all my cash flow is gone. Like, this isn't cool. So as I said before, that percentage that you're using, again, whatever that percentage is, but let's just go with 20% of your overall rent. 20% of that overall rent should go into a separate account that is a reserve account, and that account is not to be touched. You want to build up that reserve account and continue to sock away money in that account. Now, as you grow your portfolio, it's going to be tempting. You're going to want to like dig into, oh man, I got this opportunity to buy this deal. I can use the reserve account to put it down a down payment and all the things. Don't fall into that. That reserve account needs to continue to grow. And the cool thing about it is, when it comes to rental properties, is that will grow And stuff doesn't necessarily, although it feels like it sometimes, like break down all at the same time. So you may have one property that has no repair issues, no vacancy, no CapEx, and you're setting aside 20% into that reserve account, and it's just growing like crazy. And then over here, you got a property that, bam, you got to put a new refrigerator in it. And so overall, that account should be growing, and you should have certain properties that just by chance, you don't have to have any issues, vacancies, whatever. But because you're disciplined and you're doing this across the board, you're building that reserve account, and it will help you tremendously. Because if you don't do that and you're just putting out fires as they happen, you're going to be like, where is all my cash flow going? So having that reserve account is critical. Not having it is a huge trap. So number 7, the thing that a lot of people don't get right with cash flow is it's simple. When you look at appreciation plus cash flow equal financial freedom. And this gets me pumped. I love talking about financial freedom because that's what this channel is all about. It's changing people's lives. So as I talk about this real fast, I just want to say, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to turn notifications on. And also be sure, if you haven't, to check out our community. The community is a very low price compared to the value that you're going to receive. We've got trainings on a variety of different topics. We've got a video library full of resources that are going to help you to get started with your real estate investing journey. You've got the opportunity to network with other community members to help you with your journey. You've got the ability to get mentorship from people like me in the community. I'm going to help you with things as they come up. You're going to be able to get mentorship for people in the community that maybe are a little bit farther along in their journey. We've got Q&A sessions to get your questions answered, help working through your deals, like, for example, if you need help with comps and estimated repairs, and so much more. Now, right now, we're offering the community at the lowest price that I've ever offered it for. And so what I'm going to do is put a link in the description below. You can check it out, see if it's a good fit, but I can promise you the value is worth every single penny of it. So let's jump back to the video. So as I was saying, cash flow plus appreciation equals financial freedom, because that is what you need to really focus on. There are certain deals that I buy that are more so an appreciation play. Like, I buy certain properties where my cash flow is not really that great. And I'm in a place now where I can even buy some properties that break even just because of where I am in my real estate investing journey. I would definitely recommend to focus on trying to find properties that have cash flow. But you can look at these properties that are going to appreciate well. You can look at some properties that are going to be more cash flow heavy and maybe less appreciative. Like, there are dangers in going after the really, really cheap properties. But I will say, in the beginning, I did that, and it kind of helped me to get my real estate investing journey kind of kicked off. So I don't necessarily say, like most people that go out there say, don't buy anything on the lower socioeconomic side, that sort of thing. I don't necessarily say that. I think you need to be aware of what you're getting yourself into. Theoretically, it's just the way it is. A tenant in a lower income type of property, I guess statistically is what I'm trying to say. Statistically, you're going to face a lot more challenges. The tenants that I have that are a little bit higher rent, like the blue collar tenants, I don't typically have a lot of issues with them. It's just not a lot of hassle. The higher end properties, it's just not a lot of hassle. If something's not working, they'll let me know. But on the other hand, most of the time, the properties that I've had trouble collecting rent, the properties where I've had trouble with like disturbances and neighbor issues and random stuff that, I could spend hours talking about some of the stories, typically have been in the properties that are lower price point properties that don't really appreciate. They're in areas that don't appreciate as much, but the cash flow is really good. So I think that having a healthy balance of maybe kind of in the middle, looking at properties that are going to appreciate, but maybe they're not in the top A-class neighborhood, maybe like B and even some C-class properties, I think is a good idea, because then you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting that appreciation and you're getting cash flow, and that's going to help you build your financial freedom. Look, you can do this. I'm serious. Like, anybody can do this. If you're still watching this video, it tells me that you're interested and you're really looking at trying to make this happen. And you can absolutely do this. If you have a full-time job, you can absolutely do this. If you have poor credit, you can absolutely do this. If you don't have a lot of money to invest in real estate, you can absolutely do this. The key is you have to get educated and you have to take action. And so you're getting educated right now by watching these videos. Hopefully you've subscribed. You're getting educated, but you also have to put in action as well as just getting educated. You can't be a career student. You got to take action. You got to get educated, take action. And so right now you somebody still watching this video, that tells me that you are serious about this. And so sometimes it just takes a little nudge. So I hope that you will take the knowledge that you learn from this channel. I hope that maybe if you do join the community, you'll take the knowledge and the networking, the mentorship that you get in the community, and I hope you will take action. Don't just sit on the sidelines. Don't try to time the market. Everybody talks about, when's the best time to get into real estate and that sort of thing. Did I miss it? Is rates too high? No, any time is a good time to get into the market. The best time to get in the market was yesterday. The second best time is today. So I appreciate you watching this video as always, and I'll see you on the next one.